Rob Fraser is the founder and CEO of Outweigh Socks, a 10-year plus e-commerce sock brand. And this is a Profit Monsters episode of the show, rightly so. They were just shy of 20 million in revenue last year, selling all socks, a couple million pairs of socks, which is crazy when you think about that. I own a couple pairs myself. They're beautiful and fantastic socks. And over 7 figures in net profit, distributing a couple times a year. This is a profitable, growing e-commerce brand that is the kind of brand you should be trying to emulate. And I'm going to talk to Rob right now about why and how I've known Rob for a long time on D2C Twitter, now X, and been excited to have this conversation for a while. So you're going to learn a lot from Rob right now as we get into how they have built a business that's actually cash flowing, actually putting out dividends, and building a bunch of profit in a Profit Monsters episode of the Native Affairs podcast with Rob Fraser from Outweigh Socks. Let's get into it. Rob, I'm so glad we're finally doing this. I'm going to ask you right now, like, how in the world are you actually distributing money? Everybody says that's impossible in e-commerce. How did you do it?
Yeah, first off, Andrew, it's great to hang and
yeah,
you're just saying
for
offline,
sure.
just see face to face. Formerly, Twitter X, just
yep,
living there. But how do we do it? I mean, it didn't happen right away. It's kind of a 10-year overnight success, even though we've been distributing for a couple of years now. I'd say like the one thing. We'll talk e-commerce. I think the one thing is positioning. I've never thought of myself as an e-commerce operator or an e-commerce brand, despite that being the large majority of how we sell. Over 60% of our business is direct to consumer through our Shopify store. We have 10% more on Amazon. But then we've done other things, like we have a private label business where we manufacture socks for other people. And then we have a wholesale business. And so I've always thought of myself as a consumer founder, a business builder, a brand builder. And by implementing those different channels in the business, primarily all where we're getting paid either in advance or on demand, we've been able to build a model through leveraging payment terms with our suppliers and other unique kind of like financial maneuvering or engineering throughout the years to actually, profit's one thing, but cash flow is another, right? So you can look profitable on paper and not have any cash in the bank or be negative cash. We found a way to do that just through channel mix. I'd say the most unique one is our private label business. And that simple insight was we've built a business of selling socks. And I asked myself, like, if I don't want to get investors, how else can I basically build an investor within my business? What are we already doing that we can tap into and leverage that uses our existing infrastructure and skills and people that's not going to be too distracting? And I was like, hey, we make socks, so we might as well make socks for other people. And the beautiful thing about the private label business, and that's a sub brand called Custom Lab, where we have a separate team and a separate kind of entire flow for that business that's run by Outweigh, but not Outweigh branded. And what that does is it's all pre-order based and it's all bulk based and drop ship based for the most part. So we're getting cash in advance for those orders, then going through a production cycle and then have payment terms. And we know our margins. And so what we're able to do on every order is basically save what we're going to owe in the future and then invest the rest. And then every business line is also profitable. But the Custom Lab business, assuming a certain level of growth, which has been historic over many years now, we can kind of model out the cash flow, distribute that. And then, we're now a business that's done well for many years. We've been able to just put in sort of backstop protection with, revolving lines of credit in case we ever get into situations where we're going to need access to cash for, if we just get forecasting wrong for the most part, because we have such extended payment terms on our socks. So there's been a lot there. But for the most part, it's just been figuring out how can we sell everything either in advance or on demand and not pay for that product far into the future. And then also just forecast the inventory properly. We still actually, one other thing that I do, which maybe isn't like the best financial advice, but I'm happy to trade a little bit of margin for speed. And so we still ship everything by air for the most part, short of like containers that we do in advance for Black Friday holiday period. That if your payment terms typically start when they leave the factory, sometimes mostly when it hits a boat for most people, you don't want to waste a bunch of that time in transit. So we can get it here in 4 days. That's great. And I've negotiated so that our payment terms don't actually start until it reaches our warehouse. So I'm not wasting any transit time. I'm getting the product here quickly as well. And so that allows us to have just quicker inventory turnover. So we can get product restocked. We can do it. We send weekly and daily POs for the Custom Lab business. So we're not trying to sit on too much inventory at once, and there's going to be a margin trade-off there where you're going to get better pricing on shipping if you go on sea, or you're going to get better bulk discounts if you order once or twice a month. But I don't care, because cash is king, and like in the end of the day, we're going to be able to turn over that inventory much quicker, which is going to tie up less cash. And if I'm trading a couple cents here and there, perhaps we'll optimize it in the future, and we do on big purchases like the holiday period. But I'm still a fan at our scale to just trade margin for speed, assuming it's not a stupid amount of margin. You're trading 10%, like maybe you should reevaluate. We're talking very small points here, but yeah, it's a somewhat, what I've just by talking to people, somewhat of an uncommon insight is like, hey, just move faster.
Okay, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I actually love this point about this, but yeah, he had two things at once there: custom lab and ordering strategy. So for anybody watching or listening, we're going to come back to both of these. Okay, so don't worry if you're annoyed about what question I ask Rob right now. We're gonna get to them both. Okay, so let's start with custom lab, just because that's where you started. What percentage of your business does custom lab make up at this point?
About 30%.
That's amazing, and that is like extremely profitable. Yeah.
Very. Yeah. There's some days where I look at that business, I'm like, that's my just sit on the beach and don't have to do anything business if I just shut Outweigh down. Outweigh is like arguably the more valuable business in terms of enterprise value and scale and market size. But the custom lab business is just, it's a wonderful business. There's basically no expenses.
So one of my questions about it is, let's say you did shut down Outweigh, would the custom lab business go away?
No, I mean that business now, it obviously, the thing that makes custom lab interesting is most of our competitors in that space are just promotional marketing companies. And so our unique advantage is that we're the best at socks.
Yeah,
one
right.
of the best. We've got this brand engine attached to it, and we're able to cross market both brands. So every time custom lab is this other beautiful business, not only for a cash flow and scale perspective, but also every sock that is paid for by other people, we get to go out there and market our product essentially. So we're getting like over years, millions of pairs on people that have a tie back to Outweigh that other people have paid for, other brands have paid for in the most cases. So we'll sometimes collaborate, and we get to work with some really great brands. Like we work with Uber and Red Bull and Best Buy and Costco, and really cool brands. And when we want, we can say, hey, would you co-brand these? Would you like take a bit of a discount? We'll co-brand them. So unique co-marketing opportunity. Would it go away if we shut down Outweigh? No, that whole business like operates on its own now, and the supply chain's built out. The way we acquire customers is through the custom lab funnel, not through Outweigh. But would it make us as competitive? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Would but it probably would not exist now. So I'm playing the counterfactual retrospective here. It would not exist now, though, had Outweigh not existed first and created a great product first and done all those things, right? Obviously this is the case in some ways, but the reason I bring it up is that it's interesting. I've noticed this actually for a lot of brands over time, that one of the things that people sort of underrate about D2C is the way that it creates opportunity for non-D2C things that end up being really valuable. I'll give you a few examples. One of them is the one you just mentioned, which is this white labeled kind of custom product that is actually in some ways a better business, but would have been extremely hard to start from scratch, right? Another one a long time ago, I think it was Mike Beckham who mentioned this to me, the founder of Simple Modern, when I helped those guys in the early stages. I hesitate to get too much credit to myself here, but when they were starting to launch on Meta ads, they asked me for some coaching and consulting and to help them get going. And so I worked pretty closely with their team in that time. And one of the things that Mike pointed out was something along the lines of just like Meta ads, a sneaky value. I'm nervous that I'm applying this to the wrong person. I think it was Mike. A sneaky value of Meta ads is that it gets you in front of all these people who buy like for other things. For example, in their case, there was like a retail purchase or PO or something like that. And I had another client who had the same thing, who got Walmart because she got served a Meta ad. Yep. And was like, this is a good product, and it's in a category we care about. She was a buyer at Walmart. And if you're getting millions of impressions in reach, you're reaching buyers, for retail buyers. Like not and then similarly, I have another brand I've talked to that has now a really, really, really strong Amazon listing, even though they're not super price competitive with their knockoffs. But they have this sort of seemingly immovable Amazon listing to where maybe the Amazon listing itself, like the current organic rank that they have on Amazon, is arguably the best asset in the business. because it's just so valuable to them. And certainly they did all of the Amazon things you do. They got smart people who are helping keep those listings optimized. And they're, again, they're doing all the right stuff. But a huge part of it is also that they spent millions and millions of dollars on D2C stuff before they ever did Amazon. And so they grew there. And this custom lab thing is another example of that. And I think it's something brands ought to be thinking about. One more Taylor Holiday example was a pet brand that was selling their email sponsorship of their email to an email list of multiple millions strong. They were selling ads to their own audience, basically, sponsored emails to their audience for non-competitive same category products. So other pet brands that weren't competitive with them, and again, you don't get that email list without all of the D2C work to start, And I think there's something important here for like really smart, profitable brands. I'm going to do another Profit Monsters episode soon with a guy from a brand called Bush Balm that has this crazy story about like subscription in smaller, boutiquier like retailers that is creating this huge profitable line item. And so it's just something I think brands should look out for. They should look around at their current portfolio of their brand and say, there's nothing that says I have to be a D2C only brand. Why don't I think about where else there is value capture in this business? Where does it make sense for who my customers are or whatever it is? And there's actually kind of endless opportunities there,
Yeah, and I have a simple analogy for this, and my thinking is very aligned with yours, is that if you're spending a ton of money in your core brand and your core sales channel, think of it as like a boat, but not everything that's coming into that boat is being captured. If you're pouring water, or maybe a bucket's a better example, there's holes in it. And that was our kind of strategy around launching wholesale and Amazon was like, so we have a 7-figure Amazon business now, and we don't really do much Amazon advertising, but the simple insight was like, people are just never going to buy from our Shopify store. There's these people on our email list. There's all these people that are like, even myself, my own buying psychologist, I'll get served an ad on Meta. I will click through to the brand's website. I will go right to Amazon because, that's just I like to order from Amazon. It comes in a day.
Because it's the best shopping experience in the world. Like, of course you like to buy, it's like, yes, 100%. I like it better too. Yeah.
So it's like, and the same is true of wholesale. And you're right. The same is true of custom lab. So if there are other opportunities to kind of cast a wider net or plug holes in that bucket, you're right. It'd be advantageous of you to try and be in those places to capture those opportunities.
I am hiring at AJF Growth, and of the positions that I'm hiring, one of them right now is being done through my friends at More Staffing. I've talked about More Staffing so much on this show, but I love them because they give me access to the best talent in the Philippines so that I can access incredible global talent for my business. I can pay them at or above market rates in the Philippines, which attracts the best quality talent there, which I can then apply to my business, and that rate is still lower than equivalent talent would cost in the US. That means I get great people who are motivated, who are excited about the job, who are loyal, who are retained, who do great work. At the same time, I can protect my margin in the process. More Staffing is a staffing agency built to do that. I'm building everything that I touch with help from More Staffing in some ways because they were built on the back of growing e-commerce businesses. They understand the e-commerce space better than anybody out there, any staffing agency out there. And they go way beyond even those basic things. I've got an interview coming very soon with Greg Carey, the founder of More Staffing. He's going to talk more about all the stuff they do beyond just the hiring itself. So on top of that basic value proposition that I just laid out, More is also helping integrate things like AI into your operational processes with people in the Philippines. It's helping you think about how to integrate people cross-culturally and to what to look out for there. They really think through every element of how to set you up for success at the operational level of your business. And they do that, like I said, while delivering a great service. They also give you a 1-year guarantee on people you hire. So if that person you hire through More Staffing doesn't work out in your business for longer or for a whole year, they will help replace that person at no additional headhunting fee. So go to morestaffing.co/AF. The opportunity is so big right now for e-commerce companies and for related companies to be thinking about how to leverage global talent to create great businesses while protecting their profit. Go to morestaffing.co/AF to get access to that talent right now for people who really understand the e-commerce space, know what you're looking for, and will do an incredible job. morestaffing.co/AF. I love that. Okay, I have a lot more questions about this, but I want to go instead over to the other thing you said just for the sake of time. I'm already, as you were talking, Rob, I thought we need to schedule an immediate follow-up when this happened. Even from the stuff we talking about in this episode to the place we started, there's too much. Let's talk about your ordering strategy stuff. One of the things I'm really hot on right now in general. Well, I mean, I've been on this for a while. It's just the idea that people are just not thinking carefully enough about their supply chain. It's a really important part of the business. You're dialing in this very particular part of it, which is not using sea freight, even though it's cheaper, and instead using air freight. So first of all, let's just quantify how much time do you save? About a month, I assume, on every order, something like that.
At least a month. Yeah.
4 to 6 weeks probably in terms of ocean freight,
assuming everything goes right.
Yes,
sure.
Right. And what is the actual margin trade-off? Do you know? Like, essentially, let's say you had, like percentage points of margin. So like basis points, basically. Like, how many points of margin does it cost you to do this?
I know we're looking at it. If it's a percentage, it's like,
yeah, sure. Quantify it however you want. Or really,
yeah. I'd say it's easier to quantify it in cents because the exact margin implications are going to be like a little too much for me to do public math on. But we're talking in the range of cents, like no like less than 20 cents.
Yeah.
We sell a low cost product, and so it's still fairly nominal if you were to take it and look at it at scale. But in the end of the day, if you're brand optimizing for cash, it's a trade-off I think worth making in most cases.
Immediately came to my mind when you started talking about that is just that socks are relatively small and they're pretty light, and so they're a good candidate for this kind of thing, which is the air freight for that product versus much larger products is a different calculation, and again, it's just one of those things that's easy to sort of overlook, but there's just this sort of physical reality to the product that I'm guessing makes that. So like you said, it's just not that much more expensive. And to me, I couldn't agree more. Like, if you can have faster inventory turn, your cash flow can definitely increase. It also reduces your inventory risk in the terms of like forecasting risk. Like, you now have to be a little less precise if you can get stuff to you a lot faster, because if you start running low on a product because you start selling a lot more than you think, then you can get that restocked really quickly, which means you don't have to over order and potentially get yourself stuck with like a whole bunch of product you can't move, especially in apparel businesses. That's a really big problem. Like, it feels like you're reducing so much risk in your business. If the per unit cost is actually not that high, that feels like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Like, everything we're going to talk about, advice for lack of a better term, is contextual and to your business. You're right. Like, if you have a really heavy product, it's almost never going to make sense to ship it via air freight. But when we can put 200 pairs of socks in a relatively small box, when you look at the per unit price impact of air freight, it's very low. Another unique thing we did that just came up and is a random little kind of hack that we did is we negotiated with our 3PLs, our warehouses, to charge us storage on a per unit basis instead of square foot basis. And that gave us, I'm just a big fan of never relying on a partner to optimize a space or price like you would if you owned it.
That's right.
What I can control is how many units are there. And so when we did the math and we got the negotiated rate of per unit storage cost, it was much less, and we've saved tons of money doing it that way. So again, just like I try to always figure out what can I control when I'm using partners. And if I can't be in control of it and there's going to be a cost implication, you're generally not in a good position.
I think that the general way I would think about this is that there are times when a partner has so much domain expertise and so much process knowledge in a thing that's really hard to do well, that the thing to look out for is like, is that unique set of expertise or knowledge actually applicable to my business in a particular way that's really, really helpful? Like you just framed it, right? Yeah. Space versus weight is a good example of this. Like, there's a reason that 3PL or whatever has that consideration around one or the other of those. And probably it makes sense for a lot of their clients, right? Most of those folks are trying to serve their clients well in a way that's economic, creates margin for them, by creating margin for the client. That's the whole idea of a service business, But yeah, there are times when you have to look around and go like, actually, the sort of playbook way of doing this. I was actually just having this conversation with the client. The playbook way of doing this, like, you have to, if it's the case that it doesn't actually serve your particular business well because your business has some unique need or consideration, then you probably have to go away from the playbook way of doing it, or you have to be, or the vendor has to be flexible enough to shift their process to yours in some way that, often, like you said, I think what you just described, I'm sure that most a 3PL can make that work, but yeah, it's funny. You just tripped on the word advice. I noticed in the conversation, you said if you can call it that. And I'm wondering if that's because on February 22nd, 2026, 3 days ago at 11:40 a.m., you tweeted, and I'm quoting, "Advice is survivorship bias in a suit." I actually love this tweet. Is that why you tripped on the word advice? It sounds like you've been thinking about advice as a useful or not useful thing in e-commerce.
Yeah, I wrote an expanded article on it earlier too about like I forget the exact title was, but it was like, oh, it's advice is for losers. So intentionally provocative. But the problem with advice, my friend Chris Sparling, he's the founder or co-founder of Tiny, a collection of great companies. They own AeroPress, for example. He has an interesting thought on advice where it's that like when you give advice or you take advice, typically it's from someone who lacks a ton of context and nuance on your business. And not only that, you now have this kind of not spoken about pressure to follow through on that advice. There's now this cognitive weight that you will go try that and report back on how it went. And he said the much more advantageous thing to do instead of sharing advice is share stories. Here's how I did something similar, or here's an example I've got, and then it removes the need for that person to feel like they have to act on it. And B, they have to kind of report back or carry this cognitive weight. And I've always loved that. I've just hated the idea of, or resisted the idea of advice, even though what's ironic is when I write or tweet, like it comes off as advice. But what I'm trying to do for the most part is share stories. And I honestly just don't care if you listen or not. Maybe that's the difference. And just realizing it's contextual and super nuanced. And I don't know anything about your agency like you would, even though I might have an idea or some advice about it from the outside. And the same people that say I should sell underwear, I'm like, okay, it's a good idea, but do you have 4 hours about why? I'll tell you why I'm not. And I thought about it deeply, obviously.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really good. I'm glad you noticed that there's a bit of a self-defeating logic to the idea. But I think it highlights the idea that you have something. It highlights the idea that that there's something provocative about the idea that you should be skeptical of advice in some way, that there's a story to tell. In fact, even the way you just framed the advice you gave, you didn't really give it as advice. You told me a story about a friend of yours who prefers telling stories. So I like it. So I have a lot of other questions about Outweigh as it's structured. One of them is, tell me about the timeline to you said, a 10-year overnight success jokingly in the beginning, 10 years, 20 million in revenue. This is another thing I've been thinking a lot about recently. Tell me about sort of your growth rate, and actually what I'm really interested in is if there's any intentionality around the speed of your growth. My guess is, just talking to you a little bit here, that there is in some way, and that you have some ideas about how fast or not you want to grow. So I'll leave the question open-ended like that. Just tell me sort of about that process of growing to where you've gotten to, and how you think about the speed of growth and the timeline of growth, well, any stories you have about your approach to that, even if not advice for other people about it.
Yeah, for sure. This is not advice. No. So like I break it into 3 parts. The first is like I started the business in 2016 with no experience. I had a 10-year professional cycling career before that. So I wasn't a guy who came out of university. I'm not a growth marketer. I'm not your typical kind of like D2C person that you meet that like maybe comes from a different background. I'm an athlete. I understood athlete marketing. I wanted to build an athletic brand. So I started a sock brand, basically just to avoid getting a real job. In the first year, we did $350K in revenue, selling socks, basically hand-to-hand combat. So the idea kind of worked. The revenue blew my mind. I had no idea I could do that. And then the business doubled for 5 years in a row, and more than double some years. So like by year 5, I think we were doing close to 7 million in revenue. That year we had grew 136% year over year. We were profitable every year. And so my sort of intent at that point, this was going right into the COVID boom. That was 2021. I'm just like, I'm going to keep growing at 100%. Obviously, this is modeled it. I was like, oh, cool. I'm a $100 million brand in no time.
Perfect.
And that's where
nice
I got into
easy.
a lot of trouble, because like in those first 5 years, I wasn't trying to grow 100%. The numbers were smaller. It's easier when you're doubling at 350 to 700 to 1.4 to 2.8. Like it's not easy, but it's easier than doubling from 5 to 10, 10 to 20 for sure. And so I wasn't trying to do it. It was just happening because the market was rewarding it. The product was catching a nice tailwind. COVID helped. And so the 2022, 2023 years were very challenging, trying to replicate that growth in a market that was having a bit of a downturn. The COVID drawdown, as well as we were just making decisions in the name of growth. So my mindset of growth at all costs led to years of relatively flat growth, like 15, 20% year over year. and losses. We went through 2 periods of losing money. I was like, and it was simply down the market. We were fighting the market. Growth was not as easy to come by. And also my, the way I was approaching it was from a much more external point of view of like, other people are doing this, we should do this. It was at the same time I got really involved in D2C Twitter. Is like, oh, all these ideas, guys, I stopped operating authentically, really, and doing what had led to our initial success. And I remember very distinctly, so that'd be kind of period 2. Period 1 was like 100% year-over-year growth for 5 years, not trying, it just happened. A lot of market benefits from it, a lot of just luck. Your kind of phase 2 is those 2 years of trying and implementing external advice and losing money. And this July 2023, just realizing I want to get back to basics. This isn't fun. We're not really actually serving our consumer. Like when I think about why are we doing the things we're doing, it wasn't to make our product better. It wasn't to serve the end consumer the way they deserve to be served. And so basically, if you imagine all these shit we were doing on the table, I like wiped it clean, said, we're going to trim down the team. We're going to get rid of all the software. We did everything, like TapCart, all this shit, like tons of everything D2C Twitter would have said to do. I did it. So we wiped it all clean, went right back to basics. And that set us on this path of a really great 2024 and then a really great 2025, where 2024 was an 8-figure year, back to profitable. 2025 was near multi-figure, just shy of $20 million and very profitable. Again, we 4x'd earnings in 2025.
Incredible.
And that came from this, we put growth objectives off the table. I said 30% would be great. But the main goal here is we want to really understand our margins. We want to serve the end consumer and we want to have fun doing it. Like I built this brand to not get a real job. And now I feel like I'm in the worst job ever, losing money and not having fun. I'm like, what's the point, right? What's the point of doing this? Like, I don't care what anyone else is doing. I don't care if other people are growing faster. I just want to enjoy it. I want to create a great product. And I think if I can be around for another 10 years, we're going to have a monster business. It's already growing. There's a clear path. We're already up over 30% year over year right now as we're talking.
Insanity.
But we don't care. Like, I don't care if it does, it does. I say my kind of like mantra with the team now is like, when we're winning, we're not geniuses. And when we're losing, we're not idiots. Like, we try to just remember that we're just need to do our best and the market will reward or not reward that. But if we're serving the consumer and we're having fun, like it's a pretty good time. And obviously there's more to it, like making your margins make sense and stuff. But that was generally just a mindset shift of removing that kind of external pressure, the validation externally as well, and just focusing more authentically on what we were doing.
Building an e-commerce business and you are thinking about building a profitable e-commerce business, you should be using INTELLIGEMS as one of those core tools in your tool set. That's because INTELLIGEMS is built to help e-commerce entrepreneurs drive profit in their business via split testing beyond the basics. This is of course, INTELLIGEMS can do all the basic split testing stuff that any split testing tool can do, messaging, content kind of tests, but it goes way beyond that in a couple of key ways. The first of them is that you could test larger needle movers on your brand, like the price of your products, like the first purchase offer. Holy cow, you know what I'm saying? New customer first purchase offer, the shipping price, the shipping threshold, all kinds of things like that are making a really big impact on how customers interact with your store. There's even checkout testing now for checkout upsells. You can see at the different, for each test, all kinds of different elements of it. And that leads to the second part of it, which is that INTELLIGEMS allows you to see the actual profit per customer, not just, and profit per order, not just conversion rate and average order value, because INTELLIGEMS ties into your COGS data to let you know those things. If you're testing subscriptions, it can also show you the subscription rate per test. So what ultimately INTELLIGEMS allows you to do is test in a way that tests the most important things in your store and then evaluate them based on the most important outcomes for your business, which is profit. So go get INTELLIGEMS right now. It's pretty easy to set up, really fast, because you don't even need a developer to get it going. You can go to intelligems.io to get 20% off your first 3 months with the code FARIS20, FARIS20, FARIS20 for 20% off your first 3 months with INTELLIGEMS. Give it a try on your store. Start testing right now and see how much of an impact you can make. I think every one of my clients, if not everyone, nearly every one of my clients is using INTELLIGEMS as part of their ongoing cadence for how they're trying to grow their brands profitably. You should be doing it too. Intelligems.io, FARIS20 for 20% off your first 3 months. I'm absolutely convinced that the reason many brands are trying to grow as fast as they are is because of external pressure. And it's why in my own content recently, I've really been trying to provide some counterexamples to like sort of super fast growth story. I actually love talking to people who've built huge businesses because they typically have learned some things along the way. There's energy to them and things like that. And it's also amazing that these people will talk to you for free, you know? It's just crazy. Like the amount of free information is unbelievable. I'm really grateful for it. I never want to sound otherwise about it, you know? It's just that I also know, I mean, it is an algorithmic fact that when I put 9-figure brand with 8-figure profit or whatever, you know, in the title of my episode, it gets a bunch more reach than others. And I think that reflects a normal thing in one respect, is that people are ambitious and they want to grow big businesses. But it also really concerns me because there's people building, like, first of all, your business, the person watching or listening to this is very, very, very likely not going to have that outcome. So like, it's just, that's just a statistical reality. It just is, you know. Some people are going to get there, but it's most likely not. And if you, Rob, if your business, for example, is the way I say it, is producing 7 figures in cash flowing net profit every year while getting to the low 8 figures and still growing all those things, and you aren't experiencing joy in that work or some level of satisfaction, then I think something's wrong with you. That's what I think. I think it's like, I really think that, or if that's not enough, and I think there has to be a way. I think there has to be a way to pursue growth from a place of internal drive for excellence, which is a bit of what I hear you describing. Internal drive for excellence and a good kind of ambition, as opposed to a discontent that's mostly coming from external. And that's the thing I'm always kind of pushing after, because I just feel like I see that in a lot of people, you know?
Yeah, we're aligned. It's this push versus pull. A lot of founders start businesses. One of my favorite quotes is, "Entrepreneurship is a trauma response." And you smile. Every founder I've told that to smiles because you deeply understand it. I forget who to attribute it to. It's a Twitter account. And I just loved it. And I remember it. But that will only take you so far. Chips on shoulders will only take you so far. At some point, you need to get away from the pushing factor into a pulling factor, which is killing that part of you, and then asking yourself until you get to the real answer of, why do I do what I do? And then making sure you can figure out an answer that is more authentic. Why do I do what I do? Before, it was like I just wanted to prove to the world that I could do it again, that my cycling career wasn't a fluke. I was also just an overweight child that saw people that were good at things got acceptance and therefore love, and I just wanted to be good at things. So it wasn't this authentic journey of like, I want to be great because I want to be great. I want to show the world that I'm great, and that's not a great way to operate after 20 years. And so I had to go through this process of being, what do I actually want to do now that I've built this business that provides a certain level of freedom and opportunity to mold it and how I want to run it moving forward. And that simple insight was, I don't want to show the world that I'm great anymore. I just want to be great. That's what I want to do for myself. I want to improve every day. Yeah. I want to build a business that I want. And that makes it way easier to be like, hey, I don't care what you think my growth rate is. I don't care. Like it's paying me well and I'm having fun. The team's awesome. And I think like that shift will unlock so much potential, because I also don't care if we hit X number of revenue next year or 2 years from now. I just want to be in business for the next 20 years because that sounds fun.
Yeah. I really love the way you're framing this. I'm bristling a little at the language of I don't care. I think that's interesting. Have you been, let's ask specifically, but I'm like 90% of the way with you on what you're saying. And you seem like the kind of guy who can have an honest conversation. So I'm telling you the thing that I maybe disagree with there, because
sure.
I feel that you look at it. But have you been explicitly influenced by Stoicism?
I wouldn't say so. No, I mean, like I and I wouldn't say maybe I don't care is that let me be clear. I think like I do care what other people think, like every human. I just don't let it change my decisions anymore. At least I try not to. I'm not perfect. And so I when I say I don't care, I'm thinking from an external standpoint. I really care about my own values. And if I'm not aligned, I really care, like more than most people.
I can feel that in the conversation. That's actually part of the reason I was tempted to press you on that, because it's clear to me that you care. When you talk about ordering strategy and the way you frame custom labs in the beginning, your mind is in the business. You know the numbers. You're in the details. You're engineering the business for the kind of thing that you want. You're so attentive to it that it's clear that you care. But and I think I understood what you mean. And with that clarification, it's helpful. So Let's talk about the experience of that a little more. Did you have a moment where you sort of realized that you were being pressured by the sex, or like that you felt this external pressure? Like, was there a breaking point specifically? How did you unwind that a little bit? So let's say this is a really big problem for people.
Yeah.
Tell me your story of how you discovered that in yourself, and what did you do?
Yeah, I've wrote about this as well. I started writing this year. One of my New Year's goals was to develop a reading habit. That reading habit turned into a writing habit. I've been like tweeting for a long time, and I needed to expand on some of these ideas. And my working title for this exact thing was "The network I built that I would kill for almost killed me." And so, like, what I really meant by that was, and you probably experienced this too, like, and I've alluded to it, is you start to immerse yourself in these communities online, and then you build a network in person, and inevitably there's people much further ahead of you. And so you start to feel this not only insecurity, but this drive to compress the timeline to get to where they are. And it makes you start to operate maybe inauthentically, implement strategies you normally wouldn't do, feel external pressures. And really what the breaking point for me was is that doing all of that in the name of growth, in the name of this hedonic treadmill of like never enough and I want to get there, and worrying about what people thought, it just became not fun. And the breaking point simply was is that like I didn't love what I was doing anymore. And to your point around like I do deeply care. Like I only do things I care about. That's kind of like I think the mark of an entrepreneur is that you just relentlessly pursue something you care about, and you really don't care about anything else. And so it just became not fun. I was getting sick all the time. During that 2 years I talked about, we were unprofitable and we weren't operating authentically. I was just like every 3 weeks I felt like I was getting some different sickness. I very distinctly remember driving home one day from work and just thinking like, I will trade this business for the opportunity to feel good again. So like I got to that point where I was like, I'd just rather not do this anymore if I can just feel healthy and I can feel, for lack of a better term, happy. And so that was the breaking point, and that led to that July 2023 kind of wipe the table clean moment and find my way back to those first 5 years where it was like, this is awesome. Like no external validation. I was living in a basement suite, building my business. I wasn't on Twitter or D2C. I was just doing what I thought was cool, and it built this cool brand that then people liked. And the really simple insight was like, for those people that might be building their network or immersing themselves in these communities, and you're getting welcomed into the club, and you're getting cool friends like Andrew Ferris, and people are noticing you, and you feel this desire to maybe like moderate yourself or change or adapt to how they do things. You're forgetting that the reason that you're interesting to them is because you are who you are. So you don't need to change. And that was the simple insight. It was like, oh, I'm already in the club. I don't need to mold myself to other people to make myself more like them, who's not the actual person that they liked in the first place. So again, I'm getting like real kind of like in the mental weeds here.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could do tactics a lot, and we already did some of them actually. And I'll probably want to come back to a couple little more business insights, but I was, reading some of your stuff before we talked, and was looking at you did a really, really good post called "What 10 Years of Building Taught Me That Nobody Else Would," and it's 10 points from your sort of 10-year journey. And this is just the kind of thing I hear people who have been building for a long time talk about. Like the 3-year founder doesn't say the things you're saying. They probably have other insights. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to talk to them and learn, but this sort of very human element of it over the long term becomes a larger and larger and larger percentage of it, because some of the highs and lows just become less central to the experience, I think, especially if you're a little more stable in the business and some of those things. So I really love it. Don't apologize at all for sort of going to those places. I think it's really good. I'm interested too to hear sort of how you maintain that on the other side, ambition. You've described a negative kind of approach to that problem, and I will comment one more thing on this, which is that there's a really great essay by C.S. Lewis called The Inner Ring. And the idea of the inner ring, but basically the whole point of it is that there's always another group that's more inner than the one that you're in, always, basically. And that is actually one of the biggest temptations and drivers of bad behavior in the world, that basically like it's incredibly powerful, right? That you're describing it, which is this thing of and here's an easy example for me. Like I am Andrew Ferris, I'm doing this, but I'm not on the Operators podcast, and those guys aren't, they're not really my good friends in the way they are with each other, and it's not. I don't have that kind of influence in the community. And so, what if I could find a way to get to, to their level. You know what I would find if I got there? That there's actually another ring inside that probably that I'm not in or something. And so that just that when you look around, this behavior is absolutely everywhere. And so finding a way to resist that temptation, I think, is significant, in my view. And so if that is a negative ambition for sort of growth, like you just described having a 20-year pathway as you and being much less up and down with this, you're not the smartest person in the world when you're winning and you're not an idiot when you're losing. Is there anything that sort of keeps you ambitious about the timeline of Outweigh? What is that?
Yeah, I think it's just the relentless pursuit to be better than yesterday. It's not a sexy answer, but I think if you believe in the power of compounding growth, which is like one of the most powerful influences in the world, then if you are attempting and succeeding at just improving incrementally every day, that should be the goal, and then extend the time horizon. I think that the biggest problems I've run into in business is when I try to compress the timeline, when I try to rush outcomes, when sometimes they just take longer than you'd imagine. Like where I am today is where I wanted to get 3 years ago. It just took longer than I thought. And I put this pressure on myself to do it when no one else was putting that pressure and there was no reason to compress the timeline. And so like that is one of the conundrums of trying to get to a place of operating authentically, as you, or some people might call it content. And one of the downsides of being content would be that you would probably lack ambition. And I don't think that the two have to be mutually exclusive. I think
agree
you can
completely.
Be happy or content, but you can be incredibly ambitious. And I've just been fortunate to meet people that are like that. But
what are they like? Like what? Like they're still them or whatever. Because this is like a big thing for me, Rob. So I'm really curious about this. Like this is like it's so much of what I'm interested in is this question of like ambition from a place of contentment instead of discontent. I'm really fascinated by this. So please tell me about this.
Well, Brent Beshore would call it like clean fuel versus dirty fuel. And so what they're like is they're way more focused. That's what they are, is like they're incredibly focused. I'm thinking of one individual. I'm not going to name just because I'm just
that's fine.
Reasons, but they're incredibly focused, and it creates this sort of like force field or horse blinders around these people where like you can't shake them because they're so internally driven. They're not looking for external validation. They're incredibly secure, meaning that like advice isn't going to shake them, or talking shit's not going to shake them. They're going to protect their time relentlessly. Whereas if you're, maybe on the opposite end where you're doing it still, chasing things for external validation or the wrong reasons, a lot of those things are going to shake you. You're going to look for shiny objects. You're going to advice and talking is really going to affect you because you're externally driven. And so what I admire about these people, and what makes them kind of like scary and dangerous a little bit, is you can't shake them. You can't compete with them because they're playing their own game. Which is really interesting, and just I admire that kind of attitude when you get to the place of like, they're still competitive and they still are taking the inputs. Like they're like I'm saying, all these
Absolutely.
people are still human, and so like what you say will still hurt them, but it can't shake them. Is the difference of what I'm saying is like, maybe it's not that's my best way I can articulate it right now. I've never actually, that was a good question. I've never been asked that or really thought too much about it, but I think you've given me an idea for a future writing piece.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, glad to be some help. I am very fascinated. It just occurred to me, like I would love to see if I could get Brent to come on the pod. He's one of those guys I think a lot of people look at as having something to offer in this world. Let's do a little more business stuff. You've got a couple takes, and one of the things I hear you being excited about is brand and product, and as that being really, really important. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you're thinking about the importance and centrality of brand, the importance and centrality of great product in your growth story. Because I hear you more excited about that than sort of a neat tactic or whatever. In fact, if anything, I hear you describing a situation where you kind of moved away from all of the bells and whistles and focus much more on brand and product.
Yeah, I think like these two are things that are going to have to persist no matter what. Some tactics will come and go. The brand and the product are going to have to, the longevity aspects of the business. And say what makes, I'm obsessed with socks and our product. And I just truly think that like it's a $60 billion market, socks globally. So like I get asked all the time, and I'm probably leaving money off the table when I'm expanding our product line yet, where we have some actually stuff in development for the first time. We're going to probably release some new products, but on a longer time frame anyway. And so I'm obsessed with this idea of how can we do more in the sock space? How can we make the product even better? How can we innovate, not only just on the product front, but design front, even on the supply chain front development. So I think just like continually making our product better. And the socks is an interesting problem to solve because I'll just share this real quick because I think it's just interesting. It's like
Totally,
socks are a product. Socks are a product that we're conditioned to hate from a young age. They become when you're a kid, they're a gift of punishment, right? Like they're basically like if you celebrate Christmas, it's always like a relatively big present that looks like it could be awesome, and you open it up and it's like a big pack of socks. You're like, this sucks. And then you become an adolescent or a teenager where you start picking your own clothes and dressing yourself, and you start to focus on things that signal something to the outside world. Your t-shirt, your pants, your shoes, other accessories, socks, you don't care about. They don't tell a story. And so you go into your basically adult life learning that I shouldn't care about my socks. I actually reluctantly buy them. And so no one's experienced or introduced to the idea that a sock could be better. So it creates a really interesting marketing problem of how do you convince people they need a better sock when they don't even think about it. It's easier when people are dealing with real problems of things they buy every day. So that creates a unique problem. And I'm just obsessed with solving that problem, which also is interesting to me because it means that, like, at least my view is that our biggest competitors are not other brands. It's with creating the awareness that you should care about your socks. The one caveat is the people that do learn about socks in an early age are athletes because they are taught about the importance of that as a piece of gear. But it's still a relatively small percentage of people, and you'd be surprised how many athletes just wear crappy socks anyways. So I think it's just such an interesting problem to solve. It's a hard business. It's a low margin product. You have to sell a huge volume, but it's an interesting one because not a lot of people care to solve it. And I think that's actually one thing, like that's what's presented such a unique opportunity in our private label business. You'd be surprised at how many brands we make socks for that you just wouldn't know because they've set up their entire supply chain in cut and sew. And a knit supply chain is very different and hard. And I know because I've tried to set the inverse of getting a cut and sew supply chain. It's just a different business, a different way of thinking and designing. And so when you think of launching a sock line and you look at the margins, you're like, we'll just partner with that way because they've got it dialed. I can actually probably get better price than you building up a new supply chain anyways, even though I'm going to make margin and give you better pricing. And we're just experts at it. And so it creates this really unique opportunity where we're playing business on what I'd call hard mode. But it keeps it somewhat anti-competitive in the fact that, like, if some new entrepreneur right now, even leveraging all AI, they're not going to be like, I'm going to start a sock business. The odd person will, and Zach Stock comes to mind, and who's built one and is building an incredible business. And I look at it and I admire it. I'm not jealous. I mean, I would happily take some of the growth and tactics, like, sure. But at the same time, it's like, awesome, dude, you're growing the category. You found a niche. It's like, you know, like we're both doing 8 figures in some sort of scale, but in the grand scheme of 60 billion, we're not even scratching the surface. Let's go do our job. And so that's generally how I like to think about product. And then brand is like, I think in a world that's going to become commoditized by just a kind of tasteless output of what AI might do, I think the brands that have built a platform and a level of trust with consumers have an opportunity to deepen that relationship in an era where people are going to be way more skeptical to build new relationships because they're not going to know what's real and what's not. And not to say that AI doesn't create great content. I just think that there's going to be a renaissance or a time of period where people with taste and agency are going to be able to accelerate their businesses and use the historics of their business and the credibility they've built to really accelerate. And I think it's such an interesting time for that human aspect, the taste aspect, plus the relationships that are already built to kind of use the tools, where I'm not so sold. There might be like using AI to find unique arbitrages, but I'm not entirely sold that using AI is going to be this way to create businesses like we've seen in the last 10 years that actually have a dedicated consumer base. And I'm happy to be wrong. But I think the people that have already built that relationship are going to have a much better advantage on deepening that and expanding it than new entrants. So we'll see.
Do you think, I mean, in some ways you just pitted brand against AI. Do you have any sort of point of view on the place for human creative in the world of AI that's particularly strong, or human people in the world of AI, whether it's at the creative level or something else?
Yes, maybe I did pit it. What I would say, the nuance there is that what I'm saying is I think if you had a brand that you built credibility with before the AI movement, I think you're just going to be better off. Not to say that you can't utilize AI to build a brand or accelerate the brand. So I think like we'll see. I really struggle with trying to have any takes on AI with the rate of improvement. I think we're actually just trying to describe something we can't even conceptualize right now. Like I think what it is today, I think we're trying to explain like ghosts or something or aliens. I just don't think. But what I will say is, I think if you have right now, from what I know and think, if you have brand with credibility and a team with taste, that you have an incredible opportunity in front of you. And if you're a new entrepreneur, you have access to tools that are going to allow you to accelerate and do things that you and I would have had to hire big teams for. So it's a great opportunity. I think if you have a pre-existing relationship, you have an advantage with your consumer base versus building a new one, because there's just going to be an onslaught of new entrants and people are not going to know what's real. I still think humans ask humans what products they like. We still talk to each other. Yes, we're asking ChatGPT and querying it like Google, but there's still a human relationship going on in the world. So I'm not sure where it goes. I just think that if you had a brand pre-AI, by leveraging the tools, you have the opportunity to really double down on that and deepen the relationship with the consumers and build something credible.
Yeah, I agreed. Okay, Rob, we're at the end of our time. I want to give you one last chance just to say anything that's top of mind for you in the ecom world. If we covered it, that's just fine. But I just most ecom people I'm around at some point are thinking about something in particular. So any last thoughts? You could take that anywhere you want. That's just sort of stuff you're thinking about that's top of mind in your day to day.
Oh man, I think we covered a lot. I'd say like if it really depends on who would be talking to you. I'd say like if you're I'll say two things. If you're early on in your journey, I would just continue to focus on the problem that you uniquely deal with and want to solve and have some insights on solving, and don't get distracted. I think I would tend, and I did emphasize trying new things and underemphasize just focusing on solving my own problem.
It's really good.
And then the people that are further along and maybe having some sort of existential crises like I had and continue to have, I'd say like what you're doing is good enough, man. Just keep doing it and try to have actually fun with it. Cause like, what's the point otherwise? That's what I would say. Yeah. It's not so much tactics. It's not so much e-com. It's if you make a product that makes people's lives better and you are driven internally to continue to do that, I struggle to see how you won't be successful and define success how you'd want, not externally.
It's good. I think people should follow up with you. They should go follow your writing. There's a few places to get that, including article forums on X and some of those things. You should follow Rob on X at Rob B. Fraser, on LinkedIn, Rob B. Fraser as well. I'm going to put the links for both those in the show notes, so you can just click to those. I also am going to grab in the show notes the recent article you wrote that I referenced, What 10 Years of Building Taught Me That Nobody Else Would. Strongly recommend it. Really, really good stuff there. Even the first point, the fuel that builds you will eventually burn you, we kind of touched on a little bit, is so right and so helpful. And I think about this kind of thing all the time. So go get more of that from Rob there. Go to outweigh.com, buy some socks. Like I said, big fan. So I can vouch. And Rob, I really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was it took some unexpected turns for the better, I think, and it was a blast, man. It was great to chat. Thanks for having me on.
You thought I was just gonna go all tactics with you the whole time, and
yeah, you never know where these are gonna go, right? I prefer conversations, and I think if people want tactics, there's great tactical people out there. Maybe I'd have a different perspective.
I'm sure you have plenty of those too if we pressed into it, but not today. That'll be a different time. All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
I loved that conversation with Rob Fraser. You should subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, because I've got more great conversations coming up like that. I gave Rob the come back anytime offer right when we hung up. So subscribe so you don't miss him when he does, because obviously a really thoughtful guy and is thinking about the kinds of things that are sort of most interesting to me in e-commerce, which is this human element of it on top of the operational excellence that creates the kind of outcomes that he's talking about today. It is really, really hard to build an 8-figure business that's distributing profitably, distributing regularly, especially multiple times a year in e-commerce. He's doing an incredible job with it. I had many, many more questions that we didn't get to this time. So like I said, subscribe. Maybe in the comments, leave me some of the questions you'd want to ask Rob so that I can bank those for the next time he comes on. We talked about maybe a quarterly kind of thing or something like that. Who knows? I'm sure he'll come back soon. Really, really good episode, I thought. do comment wherever you're watching or listening as well. I read every comment, particularly on YouTube or Spotify. So if you're in one of those two places, comment. I see all of those, and try to interact with absolutely as many of them as possible. In fact, if there's a place that you want to get my attention on your question or your business or something, the comments section is probably the best bet at doing it, because I really do read all of them. So try to interact with all of them. So do that. And of course, go to ajfgrowth.com if you're interested in seeing anything else I'm doing, including working with me and my team at AJF Growth. You can fill out the form on the website there to tell me a little bit about your business so that I can understand it a little better. Even if we are not the right fit as an agency for you, I might have a great recommendation for somebody who is. So tell me a little bit about your business, and we'll see if we can be some help. Big thanks to my friends at INTELLIGEMS and More Staffing. The links for both of those are in the show notes. Go check those out as well. Thanks so much for watching or listening. I'll see you next time.